You're listening to a Raconteur Studios podcast.
Hello, my lovely listeners, and welcome back to the After Hours Skin Clinic. I'm Dr. Emma Craythorne, and this is the place where the skincare conversation never stops. Today, we're talking about peptides. What are they, how they work, and whether you should be adding them to your skincare routine. As always, I'm joined with the wonderful Dr. Ellie Rashid.
Hello, everyone.
Now, peptides have made a bit of a comeback in skincare because they were used for a while a few decades ago, and it seems now that they are everywhere and they're in everything. And it's a hugely searched term on Google, and it's been increasing by around about 5,000% in just 1 month. So if ever there was a skincare group of ingredients that are massively trending, it is peptides.
Yeah, it is very trendy. Very good.
Do you think that is because there's also this kind of increased move in injectable forms of peptides?
Yeah, so I guess let's first break down what peptides are. So peptides are these short chains of amino acids, and amino acids are the building blocks for our proteins. And peptides have been around for very, very, very many years. So they were first described in the 1800s, and then in 1921 is when insulin was discovered, and then very important peptides like oxytocin, growth hormone have all been developed. And then really in skincare, they've been around for very many decades, and they've caught the attention of the consumer because of this particular category of peptides called neurotransmitter inhibiting peptides, which is called Argireline. There are 4 different groups of peptides. So we've got the signal peptides that signal for certain cellular processes in the skin, like collagen and elastin production. Then we have the neurotransmitter inhibiting peptides. So these block neurotransmitters in the skin. So that's the one that's termed Botox in a bottle. We've got Argireline. We've got carrier peptides. So these help to carry trace elements to the skin, like copper or magnesium. And then we've got the enzyme inhibiting peptides. So the enzymes are things like MMP or matrix metalloproteinase that gobbles up collagen, elastin, and breaks it down. So if you have a peptide that stops or reduces the effect of that, then it means that your collagen, elastin will remain intact in your skin. So those are, broadly speaking, the 4 main groups of peptides.
And whenever somebody's describing them to me, like, what are they? I don't understand what they do. And I kind of think of them, they're like little text messages. And they kind of like pass a text message to the cell. And then depending on what the text message is being passed to that cell, it tells it what to do. So it's not actually making the collagen, but it's telling the cell to make the collagen.
It's a good delegator.
Do you like that? Yeah.
It's a little instruction text. Do this.
So they work in these various different ways, and depending on which peptides are being used, depends on what the function or whatever then tends to happen afterwards. But even if we think about these peptides and we want to look at them in the hard kind of light of scientific evidence, what is the evidence for them?
So the most amount of evidence that we have is for a signaling peptide called Matrixyl, which has been incorporated in lots of different skincare products. So that has got some evidence. I think to broadly say that peptides as a group have lots of evidence. You just want to know exactly what the type of peptide is that's within that skincare formulation. So I think that's the most widely studied peptide.
I mean, I'd say, I suppose if we try and break them down, the one Matrixyl is the most studied, isn't it? It's got more research behind it than any of the others. But even that only really has very small numbers included in the studies that are run in humans. In almost everything else, these are all lab-based studies, and they're not actually tested on real life humans to see that difference. And so the vast majority of all of those peptides that we're seeing everywhere is based on that kind of research rather than in human studies. That's why it's often a little bit more difficult to say what those outcomes are, because how something behaves in a cell on a petri dish is actually can be quite different of how that behaves whenever it's biologically incorporated into a human cell in an active human person. It also can be a little bit difficult sometimes for those peptides to get into the skin. So sometimes they're quite clever and they get the little peptide, which is a little bit more difficult to get into the skin, and might add a little fat end to it so that it can get absorbed into the skin a bit better. And sometimes these peptides are delivered after there's been maybe an exfoliation of the skin so that they're easier to get in. And sometimes they're delivered alongside laser treatments to try and deliver them in a little bit better. But for the vast majority of them, they do struggle a little bit to get in unless these other methods are employed.
Yeah, sometimes they're encapsulated as well, so just to help with the absorption. Sometimes they can be broken down into much, much smaller little elements, so sort of hydrolyzed elements or nanoparticles to try and help aid the absorption, and then it can function in a better way. So a signalling peptide will work better depending on the absorption into the skin.
Yeah, so just because it doesn't have those big scale studies and evidence to show that it does do these things, I think that in skincare, it is something that we're probably going to see added more to them, because the science is there in the labs, in the Petri dishes. It's just maybe going to take a bit more time until we see it played out in human bodies, really, I guess.
I think the whole dermocosmetic industry, though, that's a real issue that we have, because it costs so much to run gold standard randomized control trials in humans in order to assess efficacy of a product. And really, they don't need to, because they're not marketed as a drug. So why would any company spend the millions and millions and millions of pounds required to then assess that in the most robust way that we know?
It is crazy, because you can make any claim that you want, really, if you've got some kind of level of evidence it's happening in some part of the cell or some part of the pathway of creating collagen, but it doesn't necessarily get extrapolated to being in humans. I saw a crazy claim on a skincare product this week, and I mean, it was just ridiculous. It was in print, and I'll not name the company.
Do it.
Actually, can't remember the name of the company. I actually can't pronounce the name of the company, so that's a clue as well. But it was claiming that applying this increased your collagen by 52% the next day. I was like, this was in a really printed in print in a magazine that really you would have thought would have known better. And I just thought,
there needs to be some responsibility on the magazine, though. I mean, surely, if you're going to print something, you need to do your due diligence and make sure that that claim has been confirmed in some way, shape or form. Like, what are they even basing that on? Such a random number plucked out of the air.
So I do find that very frustrating, that these claims can often be made without the true science necessarily to back it up. And actually then that sometimes muddies the water and makes you think that other skincare ingredients that might not have a lot of evidence but might be doing something, you sometimes, they're not going to do anything because that's not doing it, and everything's just all lies and lies and lies. But I think with peptides, there is a bit more of a story there. The science is there. It's just perhaps not as much as the marketing might claim. Would you say that?
Yeah, I think there is some evidence, but it's just not very robust evidence, as is the case with all of these types of moisturisers.
Do you put any peptides on your skin?
I do, actually.
Which ones?
So I'm using the Medik8 Liquid Peptides at the moment. And I just think I use it as a moisturiser. So I think if I'm using a moisturiser, why not just have a peptide moisturiser if it's going to have some benefit? So then I've got my antioxidant in the morning and my SPF, and then I've got my clearer with tretinoin and azelaic acid. And then I tend to put a moisturiser on over the top of clearer, particularly if I'm getting a bit dry. And I'd use a peptide moisturiser.
They're either going to do nothing or they are going to coax your own skin into behaving a bit better. And I don't think the answer is that they're going to do nothing. So what about the Botox in a jar claim?
So the Botox in a jar claim, it's a group of peptides which work on the neurotransmitter, and it inhibits this neurotransmitter. And the most common one, or the one that's been most studied, is called Argireline. And the way it works is that it blocks this SNAP25 process. So when the nerves release a neurotransmitter to the muscle and cause that muscle to contract, and that's what gives people wrinkles, then what Argireline can do is it reduces the transmission of those neurotransmitters to the muscle. So it can reduce the appearance of wrinkles. But this is a very transient benefit. But there was a study, which is quite an old study now, from 2002, that looked at Argireline use for 30 days, and there was a reduction of 30% in the appearance of the wrinkles. But as we've always said throughout every episode, even if you were to just put a moisturiser onto the skin, it can reduce the appearance of wrinkles.
I know, it's so hard. Why is everybody just out to trick us? We just want to put stuff on to make our skin young.
Tell us the truth.
I know. Just tell us the truth.
So who do we think should be using peptides, and can everyone use them?
So peptides are really designed to do specific jobs. So the idea really is that in the skincare industry, they're being used to try and help the skin stay younger for longer. They're not really being used for any of the other conditions, really, although perhaps a little bit of barrier support. But again, that ties into helping the skin behave younger for longer. And so I suppose it's anybody who's wanting to embrace that. So particularly people, I think, who have had a bit of UV exposure in the past and they're trying to coax their skin back to better health. I suppose that I would say would be the optimal group of people to try and start using this. So it's really for those cosmetic benefits that they say that they will have. And, it's adding in a little bit extra to try and help boost the collagen response within the skin. I would say that would be the group of people.
Yeah, I agree. And I think most people can use them. I don't know many people that can't use them. I guess the only people that couldn't use it is if they had very sensitive skin and if there were to be some additional ingredients in there, like fragrance chemicals that they might be sensitized to. So do you think we should be spending hundreds of pounds on them, or should we just be getting in-clinic procedures instead?
I think with peptides, they're not all kind of created equally. And just because somebody has written, say, for example, Argireline on a bottle, you don't really know how much of that you're getting. You don't know how potent that particular volume of it might be. So I think that, no, they're not all created equally. And I think if you're wanting to start incorporating peptides into your routine, that's probably one of the things to bear in mind. Just because it says it on the bottle doesn't mean you're going to get very much of it at all. There are some peptide serums that are designed in a way that's thought to optimize delivery of them into the skin. So I think that's pretty clever. And I think I would stick with companies that have at least tried to do some studies to show how it's delivered and the benefit from those studies. I think of the study that SkinCeuticals did for their P-Tiox that shows a benefit of using these. So I think that you want to probably at least look for companies that are doing studies in humans and trying to get the best studies that you can, ideally with a control group so you can truly compare. But as we said, these studies are very difficult and far between. So I think it's about having a brand that you trust and then committing to it. But do you need to spend a whole lot of money on it? Some peptides are actually quite expensive, so sometimes you do have to.
Well, I think if you're looking for the Botox in a bottle, just get Botox.
Oh, you mean instead of getting Botox? Oh, yes. I mean, it's not going to do that. I mean, imagine if it did do that.
Oh, God, wonderful.
Yeah, but it just does
not.
It just won't. It just won't. Again. Just a lie. It just feels.
And then you also think about sort of inducing new collagen and elastin, and we've got so many great energy-based devices in clinic now that can do that in a controlled thermal energy, stimulating your own natural intrinsic production in a far more efficient way than sort of rubbing a peptide cream onto your skin. And as you said before, the absorption is so variable because of the size of these peptides. So something additional needs to be done to ensure that it's penetrating the skin to then infer its benefit.
Yeah, and exactly right. If you're just doing it to try and increase the collagen production of your skin, well, then we have certain drugs like tretinoin that we know will do that. So, I would stick with those things before I would then add the extra benefit of the peptide in.
Yeah, little Brucey bonus. If you want to add it in once you've established your sun protection, antioxidant, tretinoin, and if you can, energy-based devices and botulinum toxin. And then you can put peptides in.
So peptides for me are definitely not a no. They're a yeah, but a yeah.
Yeah. If you fancy it.
So I do have a peptide serum that I will use from time to time. I'm not so diligent with peptides as I am with the other things. But I really like the SkinCeuticals P-Tiox.
Yeah, so I've got a few that I use. The Paula's Choice peptides I use, the Medik8 Liquid peptides, and I also like the Allies of Skin Peptides.
But again, I just don't know whether I just like those little formulations and my skin feels better after that immediate application.
Or I just feel better.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing something positive.
So, my lovely listeners, that's a wrap for today. Hopefully you feel clued up and less confused about peptides. Let us know if there's anything else you'd like to know in the comments. And if you're loving what we're doing here, do give us a follow if you haven't done already. That way you'll never miss an episode, and it also helps us reach more people like you. Okay, that's bye for now. Thank you for joining me, Ellie.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, my lovely listener, for joining us. Take care of yourself and your skin. Please wear your SPF, and see you next time on the After Hours Skin Clinic. As always, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Please consult your healthcare professional before making a change to your treatment.